Hello, I hope you are doing well. Last time we created a painting that was inspired by Bob Ross's response to someone inquiring about creating art if you're colorblind. We talked about value and what that means, and we ended up with a nice monochromatic piece. And if you haven't checked out that video yet, go ahead and check that out. Today, I want to add some color to that painting through a technique called glazing. Now, before we go ahead and get started, subscribe to this channel if you haven't already, and share it with someone who you think might benefit from these fundamentals. If you've got a question about something specific, leave a comment below and I'll do my best to address it. I'm Kendall Stump, and welcome to the Stump Project. Okay, we're going to get started here. The first thing that I did was I put a nice coating of liquid on my canvas, and you know this stuff right here. What this is going to do is help speed up the drying time of the glazing. If you have to come back and glaze again, you want to do this, time efficiently as possible. So the faster this stuff dries, the better. It's going to be a faster process than the regular oil painting anyway, because we're going to mix it with a little bit of linseed oil and odorless mineral spirits, and that in itself is going to help increase the drying time. So there's a couple of things that we're going to do today, or you should know about. We should talk about in regards to glazing. So your paint, you can see this right here. This is Winsor Newton. I like to use Winsor Newton, but all your paints are going to be marked with a transparency setting with a transparency notifier. This is going to let you know how transparent or opaque your paint is. This is yellow ochre, and it has a solid black box, which means that yellow ochre is opaque. We can look at something like, this is Prussian blue, and it has an empty box, which means Prussian blue is transparent. Keep these things in mind as you're glazing. You want transparent paint. So you're going to achieve that even with opaque paint, because we're going to mix it and dilute it. And you need it diluted so that it goes on thin enough to not disturb your value painting that you've developed. Some cases maybe you want to add some opaque paint, and that opaque paint could be white, titanium white. Maybe because you want to maybe push some stuff in the background, you want to push it back. So remember, like we talked about, the further things are away from the viewer, the more that takes on the color of the environment. So maybe you decide this is a little bit too much of a value, and you wanted to crush it a little bit. So maybe a little bit more opaque paint over that to kind of help mute that value is what you're looking for. Maybe it's, again, your painting, your vision, so just keep that in mind. Transparency in the paint is important. Okay, so this is my solution of a 50-50 mix of odorless mineral spirits and linseed oil. I'm just going to put some in different spots here for the different colors. We'll go over the colors here in just a moment. And this little spot right here, this is just the leftover liquid that I was using to put the coat on the canvas. I mean, you can use this as your diluter if you like. It's not that big of a deal. Again, it's just going to help your paint dry faster. And I'm using, as far as a brush goes, I'm using a short flat Rosemary & Co. number 12 from the Evergreen collection. It's a fairly soft brush, and you want a soft brush when you're applying these glazes. So I'm going to start from the top and work my way down. Again, applying glazes is about putting paint on the canvas and taking off what you don't want. So I know that I want more of a purpley cloud kind of thing, a yellowy tint to the sky, and we're going to remember to bring that down into the reflections of your water. One of the things, this is something that I didn't talk about before, and I want to do it right now before I forget again. reflections. It doesn't have too much to do about glazing, but it does in this case because we want to, you got to bounce the light, or bounce the color information that your eye is seeing. So the horizon line here is at the eye level of the viewer. The reflections work so that if you were looking at a specific angle, that specific angle is reflected back. In other words, if you were looking, let's use this horizon line here. If you were looking at this angle here, the reflection of what you would see in reflected surface would be that here. So it would bounce back up, and whatever is over here is what you would see down in that reflected surface. They're equal. Those angles are equal. So whatever as a viewer you were looking at in this direction, you will also see up in that direction. So in this case, maybe we're looking at like this cloud area or something like that in here, or maybe even the top part of the light part of the horizon. You do have artistic license, obviously. Like if you wanted to pull this color up here, down in here, I mean, you're more than welcome to, and in some cases that works. But in terms of actual real world reflections, your vision, the angle of your vision is equal to the angle that you perceive in the reflection, if that makes sense. So if you're looking at something at a 5-degree angle here, you'll have you'll be looking at, through the reflection, you'll be looking at 5 degrees the other way. So just keep that in mind as you do this. So, all right, let's start with the clouds and stuff up here. So we're just going to come into our Prussian blue. Remember, this stuff's super, super strong. And alizarin crimson. I didn't go over the colors. I apologize. Prussian blue, alizarin crimson, cadmium yellow, Indian yellow, burnt sienna, sap green, yellow ochre. We may end up adding some titanium white to that. We'll see. Okay, so this is getting me kind of the purpley color that I want. I'm just going to add just a little bit of the burnt sienna to this. I don't want too vibrant. I'm going to just gray it down just a little bit. And then we just apply. Again, and this is a tonalist painting, so it's about value. The colors kind of come after the fact. Because again, if you have your values right, it doesn't really matter what color you put on there. The color at that point will be just to imply mood. So here we have some color on the canvas. I'm going to take a paper towel and I'm just going to blend it a little bit. Again, because we're just tinting. I want the color or the value that we put up there. And the stronger you want that color, the thicker the paint, the more coats you can put on it. Something else to remember, the more glazing you put on, the darker your painting will become. So if you have a highlight, in this case, this is going to be our bright spot right through here. I don't want to put too much on there. I'm probably going to put some, just to tint it ever so slightly, but I'm not going to put too much because I don't want that to change in value. So something else that your glazing will help you with, unifying your palette on your canvas. So when we did this chromatic painting, it was with a chroma black, meaning we mixed our own black with this. And in doing so, we had to do it in a couple batches. So those batches, this one, especially right here, the horizon, ended up with a little bit more phthalo green in it than what we may have wanted, as opposed to some of these other stuff, which may have a little bit more alizarin crimson. So you might have a little bit of varying degrees of color or hue when you're doing this, and by glazing, it helps unify all that stuff. And you can see I didn't put a whole lot of paint on my palette because you really don't need a lot of paint. Glazing is it'll cover a lot. A little bit will go a long way. You can use a soft brush for this if you want. I just prefer the organicness of this paper towel, just to kind of smear things around. Be careful when you come into the highlight areas right here. But we can do, I'll take my 2-inch brush here. I'll just 2-inch brush, and you can do the same thing, just kind of spread it around, blend it out. Now what makes this blend so nice and so smoothly, again, we put that liquid all over the canvas. It treated the canvas. It made it nice and slick, which makes blending so much easier. Add a little bit more of this color here. And the parts that you paint over, that's fine. You just go in with a cleaner paper towel and you just wipe those bits away. We want a nice bright horizon line. We just go in there and just wipe off some of that glaze. And there we go, got the horizon line back. Okay, a little bit of yellow in the sky, so not a lot. We're just gonna go into this yellow here. This is going to be way too much yellow. And if you have, I rinsed off my brush. I cleaned my brush, but obviously there's going to be a little bit of a residue from the phthalo blue, and that's fine. This is a tonalist painting. I want to homogenize my color, and right now I'm just mixing up a little bit of this Indian yellow, a cadmium yellow, and a little bit of this burnt sienna. I'm just going to mix this up into a nice, warm, desaturated yellow. And we'll start here in the darker areas. And what I'm going to do is I'm just going to go around here, because blend it up here with this other part. Again, I don't want it around this highlight, so I'm going to take this paint and I'm going to like blend it down into this. So this would be the most colored part of this painting. That, and then around the horizon we'll add some color there as well. Just a little bit. We don't need that. We don't need a crazy amount of color. Take your paper towel and then just start wiping off what you don't want, blending it in. I just use circular strokes. Light touch. You don't need, if you start scrubbing too heavy, you will wipe it off. And I'm blending the two colors here. The first purpley brown color that we put on there, and then now we put on this yellow. And without changing my paper towel, I'm just transplanting that paint. And then as I get closer to this highlight area, less and less paint is getting transplanted. So we're going to take on a little bit of a hue, but not much at all. There, now you see it looks like a nice glow right through here. And of course we'll blend this in with the color above. Nice warm colors, nice warm tones. Okay, so see, it doesn't take much, honestly. We can get in here and do a little bit more. You can get a detail on this as you want. Just take a little bit more of that away from here. It's going to add like a little gradient. Remember, I try to get things darker as it gets closer to the edges of the paintings because you're trying to draw the eye in. So we have here in the center here, we have a lot of the interest. So the highlight, the high point here is in the center. We're going to have this. We have this contrasted tree. We'll probably bring out when we're done glazing. We'll probably come back in here and add some nice highlights around here in the dark areas to help make that pop out a little bit more. And we're going to add a little bit more, maybe on top of the glazing, we'll add a little bit thicker paint back here to that background land. But for the most part, this goes pretty quickly, at least adding the color. So now I'm going to go in and wipe off my brush and I'm just wiping it off. I want to go into my burnt sienna and we'll dilute that just a little bit. I want to hit the edges of the trees with a little bit of this red color. And what this would represent would be how the light is being diffused through the trees. And you don't have to be perfect with this because you're just going to go in and wipe off what you don't want anyway. We're just adding tint. And you don't have to cover it in an entire flat color either. I mean, let it go on in different opacities. For example, like we're going to put like maybe a little bit darker here, but you see it's like really light around the edges. That's fine. We're going to wipe it off anyway, but it'll come off in glaze stages, meaning it'll come off and leave more residue here or there, depending on how hard we push or press on the canvas and wipe it off and that kind of stuff. Because if you don't want it, like if you put it on and you like the way that it is, don't take it off. So what I'm going to do is just get a nice little area on paper towel, like this, something that's manageable and controllable, and wipe off some of this thicker glaze. Again, all I want is a tint. I don't want this to be too dark. I just want to keep, I want to keep the value in, but I just want to add a little bit of interest to it as well. See, and this is here's what I mean. You can tell already. I'll zoom in here for you. You can tell how much darker that this got in value than what it was before. It was almost white. And if I push really hard and I could wipe off more of this, you can see that this value here was the same as this. But because I put it on the paint on thicker here, it stained it a little bit more. That's fine. It's more in the recesses. I'm fine if that's a little bit darker. It makes sense to me to have it that way. I'm just gonna just kind of using the residue that's on my paper towel, and I'm blending this even into the background, because I can go over that background with another color. I may dip back into that the sky color there and push a little bit thicker and not remove so much, and push some of that back a little bit, and we'll go through that here in just a second. Let me go ahead and finish blending this stuff out here. Pull some of that down into the water. Not a lot, just a little bit. And we'll blend it out so it's a nice soft edge, so that anything else we would add to it, it'll blend really nice and homogenize. Before we get too far, I want to blend some of that horizon out just a little bit. So wipe off your brush. I'm going to dip back into this yellow, cadmium yellow, Indian yellow, and burnt sienna mixture. I'm going to go a little bit more opaque, I think, with it, because we know that just by looking at the label, cadmium yellow is opaque, Indian yellow is opaque, burnt sienna is transparent. So we can add a little bit more of that. And when we put it on here, it's going to take on more of that color. Now, what I want to do, I want to add a little bit of titanium white. Like I mentioned before, we may add some, and I want to do that because we're, again, talking about value, and we're just adding color. And this color, when we start putting on more opaque, it's going to take on its own value, which means it's going to darken up. I don't want that horizon to be super dark. I want it to stay light. So maybe even a little bit lighter. There we go. We don't want to fight with this tree right here. We want it to stay with them, to stay separated. Even this stuff in here. Let those be separated. And we'll just blend that up. Right up into the sky. That's fine. Remember, as the further things are away from you, the more they tend to blend in with that of the with the color of the horizon. So we'll just blend that right on up. like that. And you see how those trees got pushed way back. And if it happens to be, if you feel you put it on there and it's still too opaque for you, then that's just what glazing's about. You just come in and you just push a little bit harder and take a little bit more of that glaze off, and you see how that comes forward just a little bit because it's darker now. There, and you see how you can tell that this doesn't fight or compete so much for attention. The darker tree line and then this tree here in the middle. We'll put some color here. We'll put some of that color over here. Put some yellow here. Well, again, well, not just straight yellow. Obviously, we're dipping into some of the other colors that we had already mixed and applying them in the water. And then we just wipe it off and just let that stain remain. I transplanted. I was wiping here, and I had some on my paper towel. I just brought it up here, so now you can see the colors. Boom, boom. Same way for here. I got some of that color there. I can bring it up here. Just make sure that it blends nice. And boom, boom. You got it there. So now we have the color from the sky here coming into the color of the water, and it makes sense. Okay, so now we can move on to the foliage here, not the background, mind you, because the background is lower contrast, it's further back, it takes on the color and the environment. Like we said, we're going to work on this stuff and then this. So we're just working our way down the painting. Okay, I'm going to go into a little bit of sap green, a little bit of burnt sienna, a little bit of yellow ochre, and we'll dilute this. Now, the reason why I went into the burnt sienna, it's a red color and green, so complementary colors kind of will gray each other out. So if you don't want it to be too saturated of a green color, you just dip into, in this color, in this case green, we'll dip into the reddish color, and it will kind of gray that out a little bit. And then I added a little bit of the yellow ochre to just kind of add some visual interest. And we just put it on. Put it on where you want it. Again, it's going to go on. It's going to look like it might be a little thick. You're going to wipe it off. So you just want to get those areas covered that you want to get covered, and then wipe it off. Don't have to worry about staying in the lines. If you have to mix a little bit more and your color value the hue shifts a little bit, that's fine. It's fine. Nothing in nature is so uniform as to just maintain be a constant color all throughout. I mean, don't worry about that. It doesn't have to be perfect. It is perfect. It's perfect how you put it up there. Try to leave, like you see right here, I'm leaving this highlight area on the tree alone, or that bush alone a bit, because remember I said that the more glaze you put on it, the darker the area gets. So I want to be sure to leave the highlight areas as dark as I can keep them. But right now I'm just adding, I want to add some hue. a little bit more green, a little bit more yellow. Just gonna break that up a little bit. And then we pay attention to the edges. We'll try to blend that color to the edge. I'm not worried if it goes into the sky, that's fine. Your values will, the values that you already have established will make it make sense. You can maintain some texture too, just by dabbing, just like we did before when we put the the values up there. I'll show you. Say for example, you just put some stuff on here like this. Right? You just wind up your paper towel. And you just dab. So your glaze will go on at different thicknesses, and it's going to add just a little bit more interest. So say for example you wanted more browns here and there. Like maybe I wanted more browns. I'll add some of that burnt sienna with just a touch of sap green in it. I wanted some more browns in there, just to make it interesting. There. See, now it's coming off, but it's not coming off in such a flat means of just wiping like we did with the sky. The sky looks nice and smooth. The gradients very nicely, nice and smooth. But maybe this stuff down here you don't want the gradient so much. It's broken up by all of the, it's being diffused. The colors being, and the light is being diffused by all the blades of grass and all the weeds and everything, that all the foliage that's there. So maybe you don't want that. And the same goes for this stuff. We'll just put some more glaze and green and burnt sienna up there. We'll just dab. Now, as we get down here to the darker stuff, or to the bottom, we get a little bit more, little darker. I'm going to go in here into the Prussian blue that we had originally, into the burnt sienna, into the sap green. So we get a nice deep green. And we'll start here at the darkest part. And I'm just going to wipe this on here. I'm not mixing this so that it's just a flat color. I'm just picking a little bit of my brush up here and there, and we're just going to apply it. A little bit of green, a little bit of blue-green mixture, a little bit of burnt sienna. I want the colors to vary a little bit. The closer you get, the more saturated the colors, the more contrast that you're going to see. So what we may do is we may come back down in here at some point and add some additional highlights up close. We'll see. And then we can do various things. We can start blending, pulling out some of those values that are there. Now I'm pushing it right up next to the water line. These colors are a little bit different than what's in the water, so I'm trying to keep that a little bit separated. Plus the values are a little bit different there. I want to maintain the value range. So we're just coming in right up here and just scrubbing right along the color line or the water line, just letting that kind of happen. And then we can work our way back down in here. There we go. And you can continue to play with this. We can go back into the blues a little bit. And we can say we want these shadows here to be blue. And then you just go in and wipe them off. Blend them in. And you can see how it picks up that nice blue hue. Of course, if you do that, you want to make sure that you capture that reflection in the water. Put a little bit of extra blue glaze down there. Blend that in for how it makes sense for that piece. I want it a little bit darker down here towards the bottom. So I'm going to use the same colors I used down here, and I'm just going to glaze that just a little bit right there. And then we'll dab to kind of blend that. And you can see how that comes out. All right, I want to put some highlights right there in the back. I'm going to start with some of this yellow ochre. Yellow ochre and a little bit of sap green. Just to kind of give me a base color to work with, because again, you just don't want flat color. It makes it very monotonous. You just want to break them up, let the colors shift, let the colors play. And then take off what you don't want. Now I want that to be a fairly bright green. I'm going to go into my phthalo yellow green, and you can use a variety of things for applying this. You can use a brush. You can use a palette knife. I'm just going to use a long flat from the Eclipse collection, Rosemary & Co. I'm going to add some white to that because, again, value, right? Just put some color on there. And let it play, let it bounce, let it be here or there, let it break through, like right there, for example. Now again, if you wanted to use a palette knife, I've got a smaller palette knife that you may decide to use for something small like that. You just scrape some up. You put a little bead on the back of your knife, and you keep the top edge of your knife so it's even with parallel with the horizon line. You just put it on, and what that's going to do, it puts it on a little bit thicker than a brush. A brush is going to kind of push it around a little bit. The palette knife will let it lay on top. Like that. Now it looks like this light source here is illuminating that in the background. So maybe I'll take this a little bit of the yellow, mix it in with my titanium white and that phthalo yellow, and we'll just highlight this just a little bit more. And you can see how that adds just a little interest. Right behind that tree. It's like right below that highlight spot. All right, when you go to Michael's or an art supply store and you get those really cheap brushes, you can buy them in packs, and you can get various sizes. This is a 1/2 inch brush, and these things are great for texture. So I'm going to come in a little bit and just dab, dab, dab. I hit the liquid a little bit because I wanted just to dilute this a little bit. The cardinal rule for alla prima painting is a thin paint will stick to a thick paint. Where this is kind of alla prima at this point. I mean, the first layer dried, but the glaze is on here and the glaze is wet. So we can still treat it the same. So I loaded up the brush here, and I'm just going to touch some of these areas right here, just like that, to accentuate the highlights. And then you can come in a little bit as the paint starts to come off of your brush. Remember, try anything that's in shadow. So some of this area down in here, try to keep the highlights away from that. You want that to remain dark. Our objective here is to separate this dark cloud from the dark tree. That's the only reason really why we're doing this. And then lighter, lighter, lighter as you come in. And then you can hit some of that on top too. You don't want to go too heavy on here because now it's starting to get lighter. The clouds are getting lighter. So if you start to make this too light up here, you're going to start, the values are going to start not being able to contrast enough for it to read. So even if you do happen to get it on where you feel like maybe it's a little dark, you just take a paper towel and just wipe it off. I just took my brush, it's diluted a little bit in odorless mineral spirits. There. I want to make sure I got that off. Darken that back up again because I want to make sure that it reads well against that lighter sky right there. Putting some vertical lines in here, like painting around where the highlights may be on some of those tree trunks. Trying to darken that. Just push it back just a little bit more. And you know what? We can even come into and do the same thing. And we can go into that blue, the blue-green burnt sienna mixture. You just load the brush up there, and you can put some more, if you want to put more darks in places. Just the same process. Put a little bit more shadow in here. There, just like that. And with that, I'm going to sign it, and I think we're going to call this done. I may decide to piddle with this just a little bit more. I kind of doubt it, but well, you never know. I may sit on this for a week before we do our painting next week and put some extra stuff in, but we'll see. I doubt it. I'm just using a rigger brush, accentuating some of these branches and fronds, just using a little bit of yellow ochre. And you just dab. Remember how we did that? Just put them on and then you dab them to hide some of them. You don't want to hide all of it, obviously. Okay, I hope you enjoyed everything that we went over and that you use this information to create something awesome in your own style. Remember to like this video, subscribe to this channel, and check out my other videos. Leave a comment if you have a question, feedback, or you want to see something specific. And we'll see you next time.